Hey everybody. So I put up a video a few days ago. It's unlisted, but I did link to it from my Patreon account for people who subscribe at $1 or more. I'll put a link to it in the actual video, not to the Patreon link. The actual video in the description for this one if you're interested. Still going to leave it unlisted though, so the algorithm isn't spreading it around to people who I just don't want to hear from. I mean, this is this is the exact wrong attitude for a YouTuber to take. Algorithm, please don't show this to people that it'll piss off, because I don't want to hear from them. But that's where I am. But in response to that video, first of Incelmatics asked, "What do you think of women calling for a sex strike?" At the time, I hadn't heard any women calling for a sex strike. In fact, I still haven't. I wrote back to him. I said, I haven't given it much thought. What do you think about it? And he didn't reply, although he's got a whole channel devoted to that topic. I'm sure he's spoken on it at length. But I did do a little searching around, and I'm not even going to share screenshots. Basically, women a few women posted on Twitter something about a sex strike. There's a hashtag sex strike, and they're saying things like, if men don't think I have reproductive rights, then they don't have rights to my body. Men in general, just all men, not conservative men, not Republicans, not members of the Supreme Court, not people who are pro-life, but just men in general. Whatever. Other women have said they won't have sex unless, with a man unless he's had a vasectomy. Well, I had a vasectomy 10 years ago. It's not getting me any sex, but I'm not looking for it. So where to start with this? I guess I'll start with the personal. Like I say, I had a vasectomy, I think it was in 2012, so 10 years ago, just about this time of year too. So it really is coming up on the 10-year anniversary or just past. I mean, I'm right near it. And I had a vasectomy at the urging of a woman I was starting a relationship with. She didn't want children, but a vasectomy, you don't even go under general anesthetic for that. It's just a local anesthetic. It's like a 20-minute procedure. So it's an easier thing than a surgical, an equivalent surgical procedure for a woman. So I said, sure. I have two children. My youngest turns 18 this month. So I'm pretty much done. I did the fatherhood thing. I have reproduced. My genes have been propagated into the future. Whether they'll get beyond this generation, I'm pretty sure they will. And at least one of my sons, I think, is going to continue the process. But I kind of regret the decision. And, a lot of the women who are calling for men to have vasectomies are, they're including the caveat that they're reversible. Well, kind of, sort of, for a while. After 10 years, not so much. Maybe with super high-tech, nano surgical robot techniques in the future, that will be reversible. But, I'm 54. If I were to have a kid today, I'd be 74 by the time that kid was 20. So I'm not really anxious to have more kids, although I would like to have another relationship, preferably another marriage. And, my long distance girlfriend in the Philippines wants kids. So what to do about that? I don't know. That's the personal side of things. On the more abstract or big picture, I'm Gen X. I guess we're still in the personal. I'm Gen X. Most of the sexual partners that I've been with, most of the actual sex acts that I've engaged in outside of marriage, and the best sex of my life all came in my 20s. But also in my 20s was the most frustration at lack of sex, the most frustration at, being involuntarily celibate. How could lots of sexual partners, lots of good sexual experiences, and also lots of frustration at not getting sex all be in the same decade? Well, it's hormones, it's perception. I have not had sex in years, not since the breakup of my last relationship. And I won't say I don't care, but it's hardly a priority. And it's hardly, my biggest source of anxiety. Some would say that I feel too little anxiety. That I should be hungrier, I should be thirstier, I should be more motivated. my ambitions right now are very much around creative activities, work, making money. But I'm in my 50s, so the sex strike threat by women, in New York City or Los Angeles or London or wherever, it's not aimed at me in Berryville, Arkansas. It's not a threat against me, even though it's aimed at men, and I do fall into that category, or men who refuse to get vasectomies. Well, I've had a vasectomy, so I guess I'm not really in that category. But I don't. It's just not personal to me. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's like overpopulation on Mars. It's not an issue. But for some people, it is an issue. For whom? Well, for men in their 20s. Of course, it's going to be an issue. But here's the thing. Here's my understanding, anyway, from reading and listening to people like First of Inselmatics. Monogamy, in general, benefits men. In the absence of monogamy, a very few high-status men monopolize sexual access to the vast majority of women, or at least the vast majority of young, attractive, desirable women. That's not going to change, and no sex strike is going to change that. That, say, 20% of guys who are, kicking ass on the dating apps, who are definitely the exception to the rule in terms of, most guys on dating apps, they swipe, 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 they send, contact after contact, and they get no response. But, the chiseled guys, the ones with the good features and the low body fat percentage and all that, they do well. They get lots of sex with multiple partners on these dating apps. That's not going to change. The sex strike threat is not going to affect those guys. Or if it does, they'll be banging 8 women instead of 10. No skin off their back. It is an impotent threat, and really it's not. I don't think many women even are making it in anything approaching sincerity. It's just a posture. It is a performative posture for social media purposes, which, the news entities, they need content. So, you report on the latest Twitter trend, but it's silly. It really isn't going to affect anybody. Now, I've seen a couple videos on this, and this is a cheap shot, and so I'm not even going to go to the trouble of finding an image. I'll just describe the cheap shot. You find a picture of a fat woman, threatening a sex strike, and you just put her picture up, and that's the joke. But honestly, if young, attractive, height, weight, proportional, desirable women say they're not going to have sex anymore, well, they're just giving away they're giving away their power. they're just saying they have no ammunition. They've got nothing left when it comes to relating to men. In their careers, do whatever you're going to do. Good on you. I will say it's kind of a golden age for dog ownership, except it's not. I mean, this is quite the segue. But I think I've said everything I have to say about, a threatened sex strike. It's like, not aimed at me, not going to affect me. Most guys aren't getting any anyway. My generation, Gen X, we had a heck of a lot more sex than the millennials or the Gen Zs. We also drank more, took more drugs, we took more risks. We had a more vivid and exciting youth, I think, but whatever. There are certainly advantages to not taking risks. And, and there are certainly advantages to being celibate. It's just, for a guy in his 20s, to be involuntarily celibate, that's torture. Absolute torture. And I agree. And coming from a guy who got lots of sex in his 20s, I still felt enormous frustration at the lack of sex in my 20s. So it's a tough decade, guys, but it gets easier. So, dogs. I was going to say it's a golden age for dog ownership because, people get dogs and they treat them as substitute spouses or children, which means they get pampered. They get lots of veterinary care, they get lots of treats, they get lots of attention, and they provide the unconditional love, which is why we love dogs. They used to work for us, and in some rare corners of the world they are still working, but for the most part they are just affection substitutes, and they're great at that. I mean, they're just great at that. But it's not really a golden age for dog ownerships, even for the dogs. There's a guy. Oh, I can't remember his name. It's Jason something, and there's a great video you should watch by him where he basically adopts a pack of street dogs that are living in a particular park in Cebu, Philippines. And he says this is his favorite pack of street dogs in the world. But there's also another video where he goes to India and he follows around what are called pariah dogs. And these are the street dogs, but they're also not just in cities, they're in rural areas. They're dogs that live in proximity to humans, but they're not pets and they don't have owners. They're not anybody's dog in particular. They're just street dogs or pariah dogs living in packs around humans because there's food. And they're docile, they're tame, but they're not attached to any particular person. But Jason would, walk up into the hills and pariah dogs would follow him, because they like people, but they're just not family members in any human family. And he says that these pariah dogs, who are skinny, malnourished, diseased, living without, reliable shelter, they're living the life. In his opinion, these dogs have it the best out of all dogs because they just get to be dogs. They get to roam around, they get to socialize, they get to have adventures. It's like the Gen X childhood. You get to go out into the world and interact with it and do stuff and have experiences and really satisfy, that thirst for adventure, or in the case of the dogs, that thirst for social, pack-oriented activity and interaction. And yeah, they don't get to go to the vet, and they have worms, and they have fleas, and they get mange, and they die much sooner. They get hit by cars, a lot of them are limping around carrying useless limbs. But they get to be dogs. They're not some chihuahua in a handbag, on the Upper East Side. That is not a life for a dog. That dog does not care that it lives in a multi-million-dollar apartment. It doesn't appreciate that. It doesn't give a damn about that sort of status. Dogs have certain needs, and that dog's needs are not being met. The pariah dog in India, the street dogs in the Philippines, they look miserable. Their conditions seem miserable. But in terms of what a dog needs to survive, those dogs are getting it. What does that have to do with women and sex strikes? Just the tenuous dog pill connection, I guess. Says the guy who doesn't have a dog, hasn't had a dog in many years, desperately loves dogs, and isn't getting one because I'm trying to keep my attachments minimal so that I can travel internationally when I have my finances in order. And really hard to travel internationally with a dog, particularly if you're not rich. So I do desperately crave canine company, though. More, possibly, than I crave human female company. Rose, I hope you're not watching this video. Still, not getting a dog here in Arkansas so that I can, get back to Asia. All right. I'll stop there. Hit me with your comments.